the New Jerusalem and its heavenly teachings. Seek first the kingdom of God, and all things will be added to you. Matthew 6:33. The new heaven and the new earth, and what is meant by the New Jerusalem. It says in the book of Revelation, I saw a new heaven and a new earth, because the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. And I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. The city had a great and high wall with 12 gates, and on the gates were 12 angels, and names written that are the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. The city was laid out as a square, its length was as great as its breadth. And the angel who talked with me measured the city with a reed, 12,000 stadia. Its length, breadth, and height were equal. Then he measured its wall, 144 cubits, which is the measure of a human being, that is, of an angel. Its wall was made of jasper, and the city was pure gold, like clear glass. The foundations of the wall of the city were made of precious stones of every kind. The 12 gates were 12 pearls, and the street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass. The glory of God illuminated it, and the Lamb was its light. The nations of those who are saved will walk in its light, and the monarchs of the earth will bring their glory and honor into it. Revelation 21, 1, 2, 12-24. When people read this, they understand it only in literal terms. They think that the visible heavens are going to be destroyed along with the earth, and that new heavens are going to come into being and come down onto the new earth in the form of a holy city, a Jerusalem with the dimensions given in the description. 2. Angels understand it in a completely different way, though. They understand in a spiritual way the details that we understand in an earthly way, and they understand what those details really mean. This is the inner or spiritual meaning of the word. In the deeper or spiritual meaning that angels are engaged in, a new heaven and a new earth mean a new church both in heaven and on earth. Both will be discussed later. 2-5. The holy city coming down from God out of heaven means its heavenly teachings. Its length, breadth, and height, which were equal, mean everything in those teachings that is good and true, all gathered together. Its wall means the truths that protect it. The measure of the wall, being 144 cubits, which is the measure of a human being, that is, of an angel, means all those protective truths gathered together, as well as the nature of those truths. The 12 gates, which were pearls, mean introductory truths, as do the 12 angels on the gates. The foundations of the wall, which were made of precious stones of every kind, mean the knowledge on which the teachings are based. The 12 tribes of Israel mean all elements of the church in general and in particular, as do the 12 apostles. The gold like clear glass that the city and streets were made of means good actions done out of love, which cause the teachings and their truths to shine. The nations of those who are saved and the monarchs of the earth who will bring their glory and honor into it mean everyone in the church who is devoted to what is good and true. God and the Lamb mean the Lord's divine nature itself and his divine human nature. 3. This is what the spiritual meaning of the word is like. The earthly or literal meaning serves as its foundation. All the same, these two meanings, the spiritual and the earthly, are bound together by their correspondence. I will not take the time here to show that this kind of spiritual meaning is present throughout, because that is not my current task, but the reader may see what is presented in the following passages of Secrets of Heaven. 1. On earth in the word as meaning the church, especially where earth means the land of Canaan. This is because earth, Spiritually understood, means the people who live there and their worship. The people of the earth, or the land, mean those who are part of the spiritual church. 2928. The new heaven and the new earth mean whatever is new in the heavens and on earth in terms of what is good and true, which means in matters of the church in both realms. On the meaning of the first heaven and the first earth that had passed away, see the booklet The Last Judgment and Babylon Destroyed from Beginning to End. On Jerusalem meaning the church in regard to its teachings, see Secrets of Heaven 402. On cities meaning the teachings that are part of a church and a religion, see 402. On the wall of the city meaning the protective truth of the teachings, see 6419. On the gates of the city meaning truth that led us to a body of teaching and through the teaching into the church, see 2943. On the 12 tribes of Israel as representing and therefore symbolizing everything good and true in the church both in general and in particular, and therefore all aspects of faith and love, see 3858. The meaning of the 12 apostles of the Lord is much the same. When it says that the apostles will sit on 12 thrones and will judge the 12 tribes of Israel, Matthew 19:28, Luke 22:30, it means that everyone will be judged according to the true and good principles of the church and therefore by the Lord who is their source. 2129. 6397. 12 means everything taken together. 5. The same holds true for 144 because this is 12 times 12. 7973. It holds true also for 12,000. 7973. All the numbers in the word have definable meanings. Multiples mean much the same as the individual factors that are multiplied to produce them. The measure means what a given thing is like in regard to its truth and goodness. The foundations of the wall mean the knowledge of truth on which elements of the teachings are based. 9643. Square means complete. 9717. 9861. Length means goodness and its extent, and breadth means truth and its extent. 1613. 9861. Precious stones mean true perceptions that arise from what is good. 114. 9863. 9865. On the precious stones in the Urim and Thummim, both in general and specifically, on the jasper of which the wall was made, c. 9872. 6. The street of the city means the truth of the teachings that arises from what is good. Gold means good actions that come from love. Glory means divine truth as it exists in heaven and the intelligence and wisdom that result from it. 4809. 5922, 8267, 8427, 9429, 10574. Nations mean the people in the church who are committed to what is good, and in an abstract sense the good actions that are taught by the church. Monarchs mean the people in the church who are committed to what is true, and in an abstract sense the truths that are taught by the church. 1672, 2015, 2069, 4575, 5044. The rituals involved in royal coronations have to do with matters of divine truth, but nowadays awareness of this symbolism has vanished. Before dealing with the New Jerusalem and its teachings, I need to say something about the new heaven and the new earth. In the booklet The Last Judgment and Babylon Destroyed you will find an explanation of the meaning of the first heaven and the first earth that passed away. After they had passed away, that is, after the last judgment was complete, the Lord created, or formed, a new heaven. This heaven is made up of all the people who, from the time of the Lord's coming to the time of the judgment, had lived lives of faith and caring, because only they were forms of heaven. This is because the form of heaven that governs all the relationships and communications there is the form of the divine truth, derived from divine goodness, that radiates from the Lord. And we take on this form spiritually by living in harmony with divine truth. On this as the source of heaven's form, see Heaven and Hell 200-212, and on all angels as being forms of heaven, see Heaven and Hell 51-58. This makes it possible for us to know which people make up the new heaven and therefore also what they are like, namely, that they are of one mind, because when we live a life of faith and caring we love our 7 neighbors as we love ourselves, and love that is mutually felt joins us to them and them to us. This joining is reciprocal and mutual because in the spiritual world love is our joining together. So when everyone is acting on the same principle, then a single mind arises from the many, from countless individuals, in fact, who are gathered in harmony with heaven's form. People become one in this way because there is nothing that separates or divides them. Everything connects and unites them. Since this heaven was formed out of all such individuals from the 3 Lords' time to the present, we can be sure that it is made up of both Christians and non-Christians. The largest portion, though, consists of all the little children from the whole world who have died since the time of the Lord. All of them, you see, have been adopted by the Lord, raised in heaven, and taught by angels. They have been kept safe so that they could be part of the new heaven along with others. We can therefore determine how vast this heaven is. You may see in Heaven and Hell 329-345 that all little children who die are raised in heaven and become angels, and from that heaven is formed just as much from non-Christians as from Christians. On the subject of this new heaven, it is also important to know that it is distinct from the older heavens, the ones, that is, that existed before the Lord's coming. Nevertheless, the new are set in relation to the older in such a way that together they make one heaven. The reason this new heaven is distinct from the older heavens is that the only body of teaching people of the earlier churches had was one of love and caring. They had no knowledge of any body of teaching about faith apart from love. That is also why the earlier heavens form a higher level while the new heaven forms a level underneath them. The heavens are levels, one above the other. On the highest level are the angels called heavenly, most of whom come from the earliest church. The people there are called heavenly angels because of their heavenly love, which is a love for the Lord. On the levels below them are the angels who are called spiritual, most of whom come from the ancient church. The people there are called spiritual angels because of their spiritual love, which is a caring about their neighbor. Below them are the people who are devoted to doing the good that their faith calls for, people who had lived lives of faith. Living a life of faith is living by the teachings of one's church, and living includes both intending and acting. Still, all these heavens make one heaven because of an indirect inflow and a direct inflow, both of which come from the Lord. You may get a clearer picture of all this, though, from what has been presented in my work Heaven and Hell. See particularly the chapter there on the 2 kingdoms into which the heavens are broadly distinguished, the chapter on the 3 heavens, and the information in the references assembled from Secrets of Heaven at the close of and 3 on indirect and direct inflow, on the earliest church and the ancient church. See of the booklet The Last Judgment and Babylon Destroyed. That is enough at present about the new heaven. Now for the new earth. The new earth means a new church on earth, since whenever one church comes to an end the Lord raises up a new one. You see, the Lord makes sure that there is always a church on earth, because the church is the means by which the Lord is joined to the human race, and heaven is joined to the world. This is because the church is where the Lord is known and where we find the divine truth by which we are joined to heaven and the Lord. See the booklet Last Judgment 74 on the fact that a new church is being established at the present time. A new earth means a new church, as we learn from a spiritual understanding of the word, because in the spiritual meaning earth does not mean the land itself, but the people there and their worship of God. That is the spiritual equivalent of earth. Then too, when we find a mention of the earth, or the land, in the word with no further regional specification, it means the land of Canaan, and the land of Canaan was where the church had been ever since the earliest times. As a result, all the particular places there and thereabout that are mentioned in the word, including mountains and rivers, have come to represent and symbolize inner realities of the church, what we speak of as its spiritual side. That is why, as just noted, the land in the word refers to the church, because it means the land of Canaan, and the same holds true for the new earth here. This is what has led to the common practice in the church of referring to heaven as the heavenly Canaan. In the spiritual meaning of the word, the land of Canaan means the church, as has been shown in various passages of Secrets of Heaven, including the following: the earliest church, the church before the flood, and the ancient church, the church after the flood, were in the land of Canaan. 567, 3686, 4447, 4454, 4516, 4517, 5136, 6516, 9325. All the specific places then came to represent the kinds of things we find in the Lord's kingdom and the church. 1585, 3686, 4447, 5136. That is why Abraham was commanded to go there, because symbolic religious practices would be instituted among his descendants through Jacob, and a word would be written whose most outward sense would be made up of the representations and symbolisms found in that place. That is why the land and the land of Canaan in the word mean the church. I need to explain briefly what Jerusalem means in the spiritual sixth meaning of the word. Jerusalem means the essential church, with a focus on its body of teaching. This is because there in the land of Canaan and nowhere else were the temple and the altar, there and nowhere else were sacrifices offered, and consequently was actual worship of God performed. That is why the 3 annual festivals were held there, and every male in the whole land was obliged to attend. That is why Jerusalem now, spiritually understood, means the church in regard to its worship or to its body of teaching, which amounts to the same thing, because its worship is defined by its body of teaching and performed as that body of teaching prescribes. The reason it says the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, is that in the spiritual meaning of the word a city means a body of teaching, and a holy city means a body of teaching based on divine truth. This is because divine truth is what the word refers to as holy. It says a New Jerusalem for much the same reason that it refers to the earth as new. That is, as just noted, the earth means the church and Jerusalem means that church in regard to its body of teaching. It is described as coming down from God out of heaven because all the divine truth that gives rise to a body of teaching comes down out of heaven from God. It is obvious that Jerusalem does not mean a city even though it looked like a city, because it says that its height was the same as its length and breadth, 12,000 stadia. Verse 16, that the measure of its wall, 144 cubits, was a measure of a human being, that is, of an angel. Verse 17, that it was prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Verse 2, and that later the angel said, Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb, and he showed me the holy city Jerusalem. Verses 9, 10. It is the church that is called the Lord's bride and wife in the word, his bride before they have been joined together and his wife afterward. See Secrets of Heaven 3103. Turning specifically to the body of teaching that now follows, it too comes from heaven because it comes from the spiritual meaning of the word, and the spiritual meaning of the word is the same as the body of teaching that is found in heaven. You see, there is a church in heaven just as there is on earth. That is, the word is there is a body of teaching drawn from the word, and there are church buildings there with sermons being delivered, all because there are both ecclesiastical and civil institutions there. In brief, the only difference between things in the heavens and things on earth is that everything in heaven is in a more perfect state because all the people there are spiritual, and spiritual realities are far more perfect than earthly ones. On the fact that this is what heaven is like, see my book Heaven and Hell throughout, especially the chapters on forms of government in heaven and divine worship there. This shows what it means when it says that a holy city, a new Jerusalem, was seen coming down from God out of heaven. But I need to turn now to the actual teachings for this new church, which are called heavenly because they have been revealed to me from heaven. That is, after all, the reason for this book.